Hi there, welcome to the Scannell Agenda. My name's Stephen J. F. Scannell. This is my lovely wife, Pam. And we're going to be discussing eelgrass in a most unusual fashion today, but eelgrass is the topic, and also kelp. So I am now designing a square grid for eelgrass bowls. I call them bowls because they look like a bowl. These will be the containers for the offshore eelgrass beds. We start with the basics of a sod farm, an eelgrass sod farm. Now, we may be familiar with sod farms in Rhode Island or Long Island or Massachusetts. This will be somewhat similar. We'll be raising eelgrass sod for the purposes of rebuilding the bay scallop fishery. And there's a lot of money in the bay scallop fishery if we avail ourselves of that. Important with eelgrass is to really know that the scallop is the fruit of the vine of the eelgrass. Now, to understand the mechanics of eelgrass is this. The scallop filters the water, and it lives to filter, and it filters to live. And that little bay scallop puts down dung, feces and pseudo-feces. It filters through a lot. It cleans the water and makes the water clear enough for the eelgrass to do well. Now, if you don't have those scallops with your eelgrass, it's trouble. Your eelgrass can become sick because there's a lot of murkiness in the water. There will be a lot of epiphytes growing on the blades of grass. The eelgrass will try to keep up and push out new fronds of the grass. Won't be able to keep up because probably the nutrients won't be there in its roots to do that. For the nutrients to be in its roots, you also have to have eels. That's why they call it eelgrass, because these beds of grass used to be filled with eels. And Louis Pina told me all this. Louis Pina, who came to America in the year 1900. I was 14 years old, telling him how we were going to rebuild the bay scallop fishery, and he set me straight on a few things. I tried to turn it on him and say, "Oh no, listen to me." Age 14, it was comical. I wish I could be there again to watch it, but it's quite a story. It's one of my best stories. Poor Louis had to put up with me. I was pumping gas at John Perry's gas station, and I developed a friendship with Louis. And even at that age, I really knew what I wanted to do, and that was to build back the bay scallop fishery. I figured, well, Chatham had bay scallops, Harwich should have bay scallops, and that's so important. So I started learning about eelgrass when I was young, and it stuck. And I really think we have to know the foundationals of what we're doing if we want the ocean to be healthy. Eelgrass is very foundational. Kelp is very foundational too. So we're getting into a lot of trouble with bad fishery management policy. We're really getting hurt. The ocean is really getting hurt. The pollution is another story, and that is taking its toll. Global warming. But I should think we've got to do what we can do, and that is pursue a fishery management strategy that lets us have a cash flow. That means if we tax the seafood coming in, we use that same money to put back into eelgrass cultivation, the eelgrass sod farms offshore and inshore. We can do this stuff inshore too. These are grandiose plans. Once we get going at it, we'll use these plans. We can start inshore with commercial eelgrass cultivation And we can have a few pilot programs offshore to test the feasibility. But once we see the feasibility is there and the cost is not out of control, which this stuff is expensive to do. But if you think about a $30 million industry between Harwich, Dennis, and Yarmouth, let's say, for these cultivated beds of eelgrass, along with top-notch hatchery production of the shellfish, not just bay scallops, but different shellfish too. And then your tourism plugs in, and you realize you're looking at $30 million a year, maybe 25. 20 would be good, but 30 would be great. You know, that's a lot of income for a lot of people. So for that, we have to have some adventurous spirit. We can't just wait for this manna to fall from heaven here. We got to make it happen. And God wants us to make it happen, I think. I think it's God's will that we work on this and not just wait. This is cultivation, and it's also stewardship. Mm-hmm. So what I'm looking at here is a square grid for eelgrass bowls, I call them. And the bowl is about 150 feet wide. It's a shallow bowl, and that contains your eelgrass. It's ventilated on the bottom so your seawater can come and go. That is tethered then to floor planks that are below the bowls. So the planks would be, as I have it designed, 8 inches by 6 foot planks. And these planks are pressure treated, not with the chemicals as we know pressure treated, but high density polyethylene impregnated wood. And that would be, as I have it, a 5 by 5 square, and the square would be 300 feet. Each square would have a bowl. The bowl would be 150 feet wide. Each bowl would be tethered to this floor, and the floor would be, depending on the depth, out there in the sand lumps in south of Nantucket, depending on the depth, everything depends on, okay, where you're going to do this. Then you can more readily set your parameters. Now, we all know that the ocean is very, very powerful with tremendous forces. So as I'm designing this, I realize that the tide surges are enormous because of my time offshore. We'd bring up lobster pots that look like spaghetti soup, you know, all tangled up in a big mess. And we had a storm and tide surges come through. It's enormous, tremendous forces out there at sea. The tide surges are among the most forceful of all these forces. The storms, tremendous storms come through. And as we know from the lightships, our history with the lightships and the Nantucket lightship, these are raging storms in the Atlantic. So the scantlings have to be large, like on a wooden boat. You'd call the beams and the planks and all this. The dimensions have to be heavy. So we'll model this up. We'll do work inshore. We'll do work inshore mostly, and then we'll model up these grandiose systems that require money. And before we do this, we'll say the money's there. We're going to go for it. We think the money's there with these industries if we play our cards right. And these have to be scaled properly. I think I'm trying to do good work. And as far as the scale goes, and when I say grandiose, it may seem grandiose, but if you design systems that are small and flimsy, the ocean will take care of that right quick for you. You get wiped out. So proper scale, things like stainless steel cables and straps, rather than connecting to one hard point, strapping things in. These are all areas that we're going to get into as we model up these square grid for the eelgrass bowls, this particular project here. This is a good project. So the floor on this is about 1,500 feet wide. So you've got 5 across and 5 down. Looks like it's just a simple pattern. And then you would checkerboard this pattern. This would be 1,500 feet by 1,500 feet. And it would have 25 bowls, 5 by 5. And these bowls would be attached to the flooring. And then the flooring would be attached to the bottom of the sea with special gear that I have drawn up. Plank, an anchor, tie washers. These are drawings of the eelgrass bowls, which would be up toward the surface. During a huge storm, would be able to lower them down a little bit, sink them down by 10 feet, and let the raging storms come through. And the eelgrass would be protected with canvas, basically. Not real canvas, but heavy duty collision mat. So this is another one of those complex systems where the parts have to fit together. And after you draw this up, you'll change something and that'll change everything. And then you got to go back and change the whole thing. That's how this works. So if you can picture a floor plank, this grid of planks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planks by 6 planks, and these are 1,500 feet areas. So the plank would be a little bit longer because it would have ears on both sides for connecting to each other. Once you start connecting these up, you'll have a matrix that'll be pretty big. And we can use anchors that are very heavy and effective. Combination, as I have it, ring anchors here. So this is a 45-degree angle on the bottom. It's all ferro cement. It's 48 feet in diameter, and it's round on top with a 45 on the bottom. And then you've got helix running through the 45 straight down and on both sides of those angles. So this would be very heavy, and you sink it down, and it's neutrally buoyant because you've got some air to carry it down. And then once you do get it anchored in place, and there are jigs for this and installation equipment that's pretty big unto itself, and then you fill it with sand. And those are your anchors. And everything is designed such that it would be recyclable to a different use. This anchor can be used on a small windmill, what I call the Nauset mill. And so most everything here, in fact, has another use. So you design in obsolescence. If we decide not to go with this system and change systems and go to something better, then we have uses for all these parts. That's kind of important. So now on the whole, you will start to add on. Once you have these installations that get going, you'll add on. But in the back of your mind, just think of it this way. New England fisheries. Let's make a little analogy. New England fisheries. Thank you. Now we have, let's say, in the history of New England fisheries, we have a situation whereby we had 100,000 chickens, and now we're down to 1,000 chickens. See, this is what a businessman wants to know. Well, where are we now? Where were we? Where was the company, or where was the fishery? I'm making an analogy here. So the New England fisheries were productive, but now we are stagnated and worse. We're still going downhill. The universities, believe it or not, are not helping. They are tied to being silent. It's the politics of the giveaway, I call it. I can prove that because I was at URI, Environment and Natural Resource Economics seminar. I taught a seminar there. And all these kids in the graduate students, they all loved my system, but it never got published beyond my work. Somehow it got quelled. And I really don't think it's a good idea. Because these systems that we use now, and you know, they've been antiquated for just, you know, decades. So we have a problem with giving away everything for free, and these harvest rights are just giving away. We give away the free destruction of the habitat. We give away that habitat loss is enormous from a monetary standpoint. And this all started in earnest in the late 70s, but it was going on much earlier than that. You know, we can pick our scallops. We don't have to scrape the bottom for our scallops. And there are some rules about eelgrass. Eelgrass rules is you want to cultivate the eelgrass, but you don't want to wreck it because you need it every year. So this system that I'm talking about, the market quota system, or it's called the sea farm system, I have a talk I called Seafood Will Be Landed in Great Tonnage. It's one of the shows. So we need, in the fisheries, we need an eelgrass division, specialized eelgrass division, because these are foundational, these topics, okay? Kelp division, this is another foundational thing. Kelp is foundational. These are all vegetation foundations for our fisheries, which is not our thinking right now. And all these issues we've had are snowballing and they're cascading. We have a species imbalance. We have invasive species. We have the cascade effect, called scientifically, or the domino effect. Whereas if one species goes down, it drags the others down, like eelgrass. Once the eelgrass goes, then everything else is going to go downhill. Pretty soon you've got the whole kit and caboodle, the whole shebang. It's crashing. And you've got, like the Peconic Bay, I like to refer to the Peconic Bay, that's Long Island Sound. It crashed on them years and years ago. And the water turned like coffee, and everything died. Yep, one thing led to another, and everything started to die off, and everything just crashed. That's what I'm really worried about. You know, that's why I say, I think I've solved global warming with this other green grid energy system, if it's possible that anyone could solve it at this point. It may not be possible. We may be beyond that hump. You know, so we don't know that. We don't know really where we are if we don't fix these things. So we are hamstrung, I believe, by a feudal fisheries mindset, and we need to change that before all these grandiose plans can be modeled up even. People aren't interested because there's no hope. There's no hope for fisheries because we don't have a pick-your-own-strawberries style of fisheries. Well, what that means is there's no cash flow. The money from the proceeds from the harvest do not go back into, in any way, shape, or form, they really do not go back into the fisheries productivity or production. Any business or farm with agricultural economics and principles, you take part of the harvest profits and you put those profits back into the production, just like a farm. That's why I call it the sea farm system. So with the eelgrass, if I as a fisherman am coming in with $3,000 a week of product, and I were paying, you know, 20 or 30%, depending on the time of the season, well, that's a lot of money going back in. And then with matches from the state, local governments, federal governments, with those kind of mechanisms kicking in, now every year you're getting excited about what you're doing, and you're getting more and more. You're baking more pie, as I say. You're not fighting and squabbling over one pie. You're baking more pies. So the tremendous forces at play offshore with designing these systems. Makes it very, very challenging. And I've done a lot of design work for the windmills offshore, for the wave generators offshore, and for various aquaculture gear offshore. Now, once we start with the basics of eelgrass, with the eelgrass sod farm, or turf, I call it the sod, eelgrass sod farm, and then kelp cultivation farm. Those two go together. We'll be doing both. Now we add polyculture, bay scallops, sea scallops, algae production from inland, salt and freshwater algae, mussel, sugar kelp, stump dump reef systems. That's whereby we get the materials, the organic materials from offshore, from inshore, like a construction site. And we take those offshore and use them as reef material. Now with these vast areas, we can start getting into market quota system based international bluefin tuna cultivation. But it starts with the eelgrass cultivation. International market quota system, value price, swordfish cultivation. We start this cultivation process for bluefin tuna, halibut, flounder, flatfish, that kind of thing, and then codfish, lobster. Now, internationally, the codfish between Canada and the United States of America treaty can be worked out with the market quota system. Very, very good system internationally. And then using cooperation with Norway, Iceland, and all the European codfish producers. Then we start to pool our resources on the cod, and pretty soon, don't you know, we're going to have some production. The keys are, basically the foundational keys are well, there's your vegetation as your foundation, and that's Mother Nature, okay? The other foundation is economic, and that is your cash flow. These are agricultural resource principles which I've studied all my life, and I'm published. Market quota system, the ultimate in public resource management, and that's published at IIFET, International Institute for Fisheries, Economics, and Trade. That was IFET 2000, if you want to look that up. And so, you know, I was asked to publish, and I did, and asked to present, and I did, and you know, pretty soon no one's listening. We're happy. And this is decades ago. We needed this decades ago. We needed this thinking. And what we got to put behind us is this gimme type thinking. You know, it's about the personal assets of a fisherman. We got to put that behind us. It's not an insult to fishermen. It's just if we're doing public resource management from a government perspective, we have to consider fishermen, yes, but we have to consider the public resources as assets. Fishermen are a part of that, but they're not like 99% of it, you know. The eelgrass is right up there. The kelp is right up there. These biological assets of the habitat, they're huge. Fishermen, we just aren't that big. There's these assets. So there's been a real lacking there to just delineate and enumerate on the assets that we're working with. So that's what the market quota system specializes in. So it penalizes, if we're in fisheries now, back to fisheries, if we're talking about fisheries, we tax the landings, but then we add qualifications like how are you fishing if it's codfish? Are you a hard bottom dragoman? Well, you're going to be paying more. Are you a jig fisherman? You're going to be paying less. Why? Because you're not wrecking the habitat. And over time, we can turn the heat up and then buy down the destructive capacity of these hard bottom boats. Just buy them out. It's a lot better idea than living with them. And they got into all the best habitat years ago in the early 80s. It was a crying shame, a literal and figurative crying shame. People were crying over it. Grown men. 2 minutes to go. So to sum it up, this square grid for the eelgrass bowl is way down the road in the future. So if we have an eelgrass division and a kelp division and we're working on this stuff, that would at least be a start. But we're not, you know, so I guess I'm one of the only people doing work like this, which, if you look at it this way, if you look at that million chickens down to 10,000 chickens, or 100,000 chickens we had a farm that was that productive, and now if you come up on the scene, now you only have 1,000 chickens and you're only getting so much money out of that, or production. And you'd have to shake your head as a businessman or a farmer and say, wow, what knocked you out of the park? What happened to you? Mm-hmm. So you go through all these reasons, and then you look at what you got to do. And then you say, we got to do better scallop gear. We got to do, all this stuff that I've been preaching about for years. I've been preaching a sea farm mentality for years, and get us away from this feudal system we have now, which is our permit-based system. We had a big criminal in New Bedford, and I guess he's still going to be all right. But we have to shake our heads, if we have any sense at all, and say, we can't keep doing this. Okay, that's it for the Scannell Agenda. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.